I'm JB. This is the Back It Up Binge podcast, and I'm talking with former Minnesota Viking tight end Stu Voigt. Stu, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks. Great to be on with you.
Appreciate you joining. When we first started talking, one of the first things I did was thank you for sending me back your card.
Aha.
Did a great job. I appreciate the autograph, adding it to my collection. Big fan when you played. First question out of the gate. What was it like the first time you saw your football card?
Well, it was a moment of very much being proud of myself. It was a lot of hard work to get there. I played football at Wisconsin, and we certainly didn't have great football in those days. We were kind of the Big Ten in those days was the Big Two and the Little Eight. Michigan, Ohio State dominated.
Okay.
The Badgers, like other teams, won 3-4 games a year. So it was not that I had a big fandom. And I was a good player at Wisconsin, but we didn't get a lot of recognition.
Okay. Let's start right before Wisconsin. You're in high school. You're a phenomenal athlete in high school, 8 letters, 3 in football, 3 in track, 2 in baseball. But you did something in track that maybe you could tell everybody, the event, what you did, and how long it stood for.
Well, I held I was a shot putter and a discus thrower. This all evolved from being a good catcher and good pitcher in baseball with a good, strong, explosive arm.
Okay.
First time I ever picked up a shot put in 9th grade, I was like 2 feet away from the city record, which I quickly had that. And then I went on to the state record. And my senior year in high school, I had the national indoor record for a couple of years. And it came natural. Of course, that's a smaller shot. I did throw the shot, took second in the Big Ten a couple of times during college. But of all the things I did in sports, as I loved all sports, that was the thing that surprised me the most, that I'd become a shot putter and discus thrower. I was always involved in team sports and different things, and was fast, but would never thought of myself as a sprinter. So I enjoyed it. You know, you win and lose on your own. There's no team to back you up, which I wasn't used to at the time. And it was fun because I led our high school team to the state track championship 2 years in a row. So I got a lot of mileage out of the shot put, which stood in Wisconsin for, I think it was 40 years. So big kid from Green Bay beat it a couple of years ago. So more power to him. He was like 6'7" and 270 pounds. I was 6'2" and about 220 pounds. So, but I was one of the first guys early on that did a lot of weightlifting. So I was a pretty strong kid.
So did they tell you that it was broken? You know, you had that big record this week with Ovechkin and with Gretzky. How did you find out that was broken?
Well, from Wisconsin newspapers, when this guy was getting close, guys that came close. Interesting enough, Jim Flanagan, who played with the Bears and was from Green Bay, and Joe Thomas, who's a Hall of Fame offensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns. They tried to break it, but they couldn't break it. But this kid from Green Bay, who was just not a football player, but a good track guy, beat it. So there was some always around state high school championships that say, well, Jim Flanagan, football player / a lot of comparisons. And of course, Joe Thomas, who's a friend of mine and went to Wisconsin. He, a big kid out of Milwaukee. There's guys were getting close, but no cigar. So it was I always got a little recognition there, which was nice because most people didn't. If you look at me, I don't look like a shot putter. And as I went on to Wisconsin, I think the other thing I'm proud of is I'm the last 3-sport guy in the Big Ten with football, baseball, and track. I kind of de-emphasized track and emphasized baseball, where I was drafted out of high school and college by the White Sox and the Angels. So it was something I enjoyed. You enjoy it's your name, win or lose, you're the guy. But I matriculated back into team sports, which I really love, the camaraderie and the teammates and the legacies of different teams. So it all worked out pretty well.
So some of the guys I've talked to, it's always been apparent that they were going to go into football, right? And they made it to the NFL. With you, though, you played multiple sports. Was the NFL always a goal, or it was just, I want to go to college, stay in Wisconsin, and just do whatever I enjoy doing?
No, really, my best sport was baseball. I think everybody thought that. And,
really?
Football, I was a running back. I started off at Wisconsin. I was a starting tailback sophomore year, and boy, it was hard sledding being a tailback on a team that didn't gain many yards. And we played the big time schedule all the time. We played the Michigan, Ohio States, and then would have USC and UCLA, Oklahoma, Syracuse. So no rest for a team that wasn't very good. I mean, and being a running back was not a particularly great, although there were good men and tried hard. We just were undermanned as far as playing in the big time like we were.
Right. You entered the draft in 1970, picked in the 10th round. What was that day like? Were you expecting to get drafted? They had 17 rounds back when you got drafted. Was it, I think I'm going to go higher, I'm not going to get drafted, lower at 10?
Well, I was disappointed. Of course, there's some ego involved, but I had a great senior year, and I moved to tight end my senior year. I was running back the first 2 years. Of course, freshmen weren't eligible in those days, so I thought it was a good tight end. I mean, you have to go by the measuring stick. Of course, they had no combines, and they wouldn't test you on the benching 225 pounds or shuttle runs, anything like that. But I think the measuring stick, I tried to always want. I thought I might have been 6'2" at one time, but probably was 6'1", 6'1 and a quarter. Probably weighed 225 pounds, and that's really not a prototype tight end. So I think that made me drop a little bit. I thought I might go in the opening. Not in the first or second round, but third, fourth, fifth round, as people talked about. But it didn't materialize, and as it worked, I always kind of thought I wanted to be a Packer. And, of course, they drafted a guy by the name of Rich McGeorge out of Elon College in the first round, and disappointed me. But, I was happy to be picked by the Vikings. Of course, they were coming off a Super Bowl that year when they got beat by the Chiefs.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'm going to a good team and really haven't mastered the position of tight end, but let's give it a shot. If not, I'll quickly fall back and go out and play in Salinas, California, in the California State Baseball League for the Angels, and ride buses up and down California and see if I can make it that way.
So when you get drafted, you go to the Vikings. They had two other tight ends. You were the third tight end, and people forget back when you were drafted in the 70s, it was not unheard of for draft picks to sit and learn the first couple of years. Did you find it frustrating? Because I'm looking at your stats, 3 games you played in.
Yep.
No catches. Was that a learning year for you? Did you have a log jam ahead of you?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I think in a way it was good. In a way I was frustrated. The starting tight end was a guy by the name of John Beasley, and then there was a Ken Kramer, who played at the University of Minnesota, veteran guys, good guys, could learn from them. But Bud Grant, if you followed his career, he put a real high value on veteran players. We had all guys. I mean, there was my year, only one guy played all year long, one rookie, our number one draft choice, John Henry Ward out of Oklahoma State, number one draft choice. He was the only guy to make the active roster. I mean, this was a tough roster, but I worked hard, and you're on what was called in those days the taxi squad. So
right,
learned the craft. I got to say, probably wasn't ready to play NFL schedule when I started, but certainly about halfway through the year, I said, well, okay, I got it. I can play, and I was rewarded by the end of the year of being active the 3 games, and so that was a start. And as it turns out, to get a year credited for your pension, 3 years is the thing. So that in a way, I wasn't unhappy, and I said, boy, I'm going to next year. And, of course, next year it ended up being the starter my
right
next year.
But 2 years later, the Vikings trade for Tarkenton. A year later, they get Chuck Foreman, one of my favorite all-time backs.
Absolutely.
When you saw them coming to the team, what was the reaction for you and the team? I mean, could you see the immediate impact? I mean, Tarkenton has the name. Foreman's got the reputation coming out of college, spin doctor, ...
Yep.
I don't know, what was your reaction to seeing those guys? And did it start the runway for you guys for all the success you were going to have?
Well, we didn't know it at the time. Of course, Fran, who I roomed with 3 years with the Vikings, when he came in 72, he came from the Giants. Of course, he was with the Vikings when he started.
Right.
He got the name the Scrambler, and there were some ups and downs. Of course, where the Vikings did not win, and he did not get along with the head coach at the time, Norman Van Brocklin. So they parted ways, and it was, I guess, mutual. Both guys wanted to get the heck out of. I think Van Brocklin finally got fired, but Tarkenton, he didn't have a use for a scrambling quarterback. when he came back, the Giants were just, I'd say, a middle of the road team. He had some good passing statistics. No one was quite sure, and they went from having Joe Cap, who was kind of a quarterback with kind of a heralded history and kind of a team guy, and now we're getting Tarkin that didn't know what to think of. And of course, in 1972, we went 7-7, and so you're going, wow, what do we do here? But Fran, you knew he was going to be a player, and we had some injuries. I would say the most important move in Viking history was the 1973 draft of Chuck Foreman, who I still contend should be in the Hall of Fame. When, of course, we had very good running backs that were getting older, Bill Brown and Dave Osborne, good players. But Chuck added something. Of course, he's rookie of the year, and then 73, and you knew he's a 6'3", 205, 210-pound guy when that was a pretty big running back. But he could catch the ball coming out of the backfield. Just created so much mismatches between him and a linebacker. It was no contest. He'd always catch those little passes in the flat, and then his running ability, turn it up. So we knew we had something, and it all worked together. And, of course, we're talking about the offense. We had the Purple People eaters, which I'd say I'd probably be about 6'3" if I didn't have to work against Carl Eller and Jim Marshall every day in practice, because that was learning experience. We had the Paul Krause, a Hall of Famer, in Alan Page in the middle. It was the black and blue division. No one really, the games were somewhat uninteresting. There'd be a lot of 13-10 games, or we would cut somebody out 13-3 or something. And the Lions, Bears, and Packers, we've kind of owned that division, always won, but we were not known for the defense. And then Tarkin came in, a little more offense. Then as the Purple People eaters got older, then the offense started to shine. We picked up we had Gene Washington and John Henderson when I first started, and then we had got John Gilliam, a great player we got from the Cardinals, and then eventually we picked up Sammy White and Ahmad Rashad. So all of a sudden, and Chuck coming out of the backfield, and a guy named Ricky Young, who one year led the league, later in the 70s, led the league in receiving with about 90 catches out of the backfield. So we all of a sudden, with our offensive coordinator, Jerry Burns, we were starting to throw the ball around. It used to be just don't make any mistakes, field position football. We would not try a field goal outside of the 30, 35-yard lines. We had Fred Cox, our straight-on kicker, and so you won a lot of games. Statistics were not a big deal. That's before sacks and before run at or yards after the catch. It was like, how many did you win and how many did you lose? And I think we won the Central Division maybe 70, 71, 70, 73. I think 8 or 9 years there, kind of dominating. But we didn't do it. We weren't kind of a fancy or glamorous team. And, of course, being in flyover America, we didn't quite get the headlines that the Rams or the Redskins or the Dolphins or Cowboys had. But all in all, it paid off because we had very good, solid teams. Not great teams all the time, but solid teams.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about Foreman, because I was looking at his stats the other day, and do you think he gets – look, when I was growing up in the 70s, he was a Hall of Fame guy. I mean, he was just an unbelievable player. He was the guy when you went to the Vikings. Yeah, you had Tarkenton, but I always watched number 44.
No question.
And do you think he gets hurt by some of his numbers that maybe don't matter? Like, I think he has a career average under 4 yards per carry, but that doesn't define him in my book. That guy is a Hall of Famer.
Oh, there's no question. And Chuck is a great friend, and I just did a little podcast with him the other day, and he tried hard. He's been trying hard, but his career was not long enough, I'd say. The Vikings, of course, spoiler alert, we did not win a Super Bowl, which is a big feather in people's caps.
No.
But when you're on his team, I would say, and you couldn't use him to death. I mean, my gosh, if he could return punts and kickoffs, you'd have him do that because he was that good. He had beautiful hands, beautiful moves, and a jumping ability. My gosh, I played in after I got beat by the Dolphins in 73, they brought us down in the offseason to play the Dolphins in basketball. And I kid you not, I saw Chuck Foreman touch the top of the glass backboard. He was a good athlete. I think his run, he was the most feared receiver coming out of the backfield I've ever seen. I mean, he's had a runner.
I'm sorry. When I was growing up, that was the name. He's a Hall of Famer, that guy.
Oh yeah, well,
I don't care about his stats. I don't care about Super Bowl rings. I'm a Dolphins fan, Stu, and I hear all the complaints about Marino doesn't have a ring. And that's just, there's so many things that go into getting a ring. It's not one guy. To your point, it's not track. It's not tennis, right?
right.
It's a team sport.
Oh yeah, and
So,
you worried you can't work him to death, and we had other players that so if we got ahead, they'd maybe take him out. I don't think Bud Grant or Jerry Burns were the type to pad stats like, well, he's at 82 yards in the middle of the fourth quarter, give him the ball to get 100. That with our teams, it was kind of a team chemistry. That wasn't wasn't part of the formula. Nobody, and even Chuck was a great team player. I mean, it's not like I'm on his bandwagon, but I really am because he's a great guy, deserves it. I've watched all the other. I've played, against the Paytons and the different guys, Dickersons and all that. He was up there, and his specialty, though, I thought was coming out of the backfield. I mean, and Francis, he was near the end of his career. A lot of times, he relied on that, the quick pass and run after the catch, and that's the kind of team was built around. So, but I'm hoping that'll happen. But the Hall of Fame, you almost have to have your own press agent, or the team's got to really have a campaign to get you in, because there's so many guys, and there's so many guys. I'll give you another case with us. Jim Marshall played 19 years.
Yeah.
Had the record for all-time fumble recoveries. I think hurt again by the fact that we didn't win a Super Bowl, but I think hurt the fact that he ran the wrong way one time, which was pretty darn funny. But even he made a great play, but then he ran the wrong way. But if you look at that clip, man, everybody was trying to catch him. Our guys and their guys, and he was so fast. He'd already 3 years up in Canada. He left Ohio State early, so I mean. But I'm not knocking the All-Star, Hall of Fame voting committee, but sometimes the old timers are forgotten because these statistics nowadays are so big that my gosh, guys are you gained 100 yards. Wow, now like 100, that's nothing.
The game has changed, Stu, right? When you were in the Super Bowl against the Raiders, you got Sammy White, right, going across the middle. He's knocked out basically, no flag.
Oh yeah,
no flag.
Well, I'll give you one even better. I get these cards. I was the leading receiver in the Vikings Dolphins Super Bowl with 3 catches for 60 yards. I think Paul Warfield, great player, he had, I think, 1 catch or 2 catches. Bob Greasy, I think, threw 7 or 8 passes.
That's right.
Game. They handed out to Zonka, and we were number 1 in rushing defense, and we sure couldn't tackle him. And I mean, they had Mercury Morris and Jim Kick, and my buddy Mar Fleming, I see all the time. I mean, he says, I'm the best tight end in football. He says, he was on the Dolphins championship teams. He was on the Packer championship teams. Right. And half the time he'd catch 4, 5, 6, 10 passes in a season. My gosh,
I spoke to Mar Fleming about 3-4 weeks ago. What an interesting guy that guy is.
Boy, he lives in Marina Del Rey. He's of course, I grew up a Packer fan. He's the original, wanted to be an actor, and he's kind of still moves within the movie star circle,
Okay.
But he'd say, I'm the best tight end in football. I got 5 or maybe 6 Super Bowl rings. But his, Travis Kelce would get his season total in one game. Kelce might catch 14 balls in a game. Great player, but Marv blocked and was part of a winning team. And
did Tarkenton call his own plays? Because you mentioned Greasy, and he's only throwing 7 to 10 times a game, and he called his own plays. It's interesting that he called his own plays.
That's the rumor and the legend, and it's true. He would call his own plays. Sometimes you'd have a little, we had a little messenger guard situation where one guy's for plays from Jerry Burns on the sidelines, throwing some plays, but he'd laugh the time. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. He was. You have to, from rooming with him, he would always say the greatest quality a quarterback can have is arrogance. He says, if you don't believe you're the best, you won't be. And the joke was all the time that, and I couldn't do it because I was the roommate, but I was like his caddy, that the Tingelhoffs and the Grady Aldermans would always kind of bait him by saying, oh man, Roger Staubach look what Greasy did. And, and he'd take it for about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden he'd unload with a bunch of expletives and say, those guys literally, they cannot hold my jock. Let's be, and the little smiles that come off. Okay, mission accomplished, because if you stood next to him, I see him once a year, usually comes up, but he's not a big guy, not a muscular guy, not a fat guy, didn't have a great arm, but cagey little son of a gun, and evidently early on he could scramble, but boy,
as we get further and further away from your era, he gets forgotten, guys in your era. And that's the reason why I love doing these discussions, talking to Larry Little, talking to AJ Dewey, Mark Dennard, you. I got other guys and there's a guy I want to talk to you about after we break, a running back that's exactly like Chuck Foreman. He's not in the Hall of Fame. His career got cut short by an injury, similar to Sayers, but he's not in the Hall. And if you look at this guy's stats, you're like, wait a minute, why? And we'll talk about that. But you played in 3 Super Bowls, 8 against the Dolphins, 9 against the Steelers, 11 against the Raiders. Now, you unfortunately lost them, but looking back on your career and looking at those Super Bowls, was there any one of those games you sit down at night and you say, that's the one we should have at least had?
No question, the Steelers.
Okay.
They were coming on, and we didn't know much about them. You got, Bradshaw came out the same year I did, and he was always getting the bum rap that he wasn't a smart guy. I think it was that the linebacker from the Cowboys had said he was so dumb you couldn't spell cat if you gave him the C and the T. And but he was just coming. He was literally battling for the starting job there. Yeah. Frank about a bunch of young guys on defense. I don't think we were the favorite in that game, but you sure thought. And I think that was the game that L.C. Greenwood. I caught 2 or 3 passes in that game, but I think 2 or 3 others that he blocked at the line of scrimmage. He was working against Yeri, and he's a big, tall guy and targeted a short quarterback. I felt you don't know for sure, but I felt I was open, and the balls were blocked at the line of scrimmage. We didn't get any kind of running game or passing game, but yet we were still in it. Other than Bill Brown, who was a great special teams guy after being a great fullback, fumbled the kickoff, and but I think the game was 16-6 or 7 or something.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Lousy game, lousy weather down in New Orleans, and you only get one shot at it, and it wasn't. Tarkenton didn't have a great game, and they little did we know that we had older offensive line. Grady was still playing Milt Sunday, Mick Tingeloff. They give Steelers credit, those young guys, Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood and Fats Holmes, and I don't know the other one. We couldn't get an inch running, so hats off to them.
Amazing. The media would have a field day with the Purple People Eaters versus the Steel Curtain.
Oh, we thought
it's amazing.
Franco had a nice day. It wasn't big. They didn't do all that much on offense, but just enough to win.
So I still recall. So you went to Super Bowls 8, 9, and 11. You were interrupted by 1 year by the Dallas Cowboys. So I still remember Sports Illustrated in grammar school seeing Drew Pearson on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you about that. I went back and I constantly look at that play, right? You guys go up late in the game. They had a 4th and I think 17, and they got a 17 to 25 yard gain before that Hail Mary. And Pearson gets pushed out of bounds. 2 of your defenders, I wrote their names down, was I think Terry Brown and Matt Blair were arguing with the rest, because back then the rule was if you thought he was making a catch but got pushed out, it's still a catch, right? That was the rule. Then they go to that play, and there are times I see pass interference. There's times I don't. I think I see it better from the end zone view than I do from the sideline. What are your thoughts on that play? Do you care to opine on that play?
Oh, I'd love to. I've been opining for 40 years on that deal. But actually, of all the teams I played on, the 75 team was our best team.
Wow.
I say that because our young guys were still young and improving and ready to play. And the front four, who by the next year, all of a sudden when we played the Raiders, they were getting old. Marshall was about 40. Carl was 35, 36, and same with Alan Page. But they were still playing well. We've always had pretty good success against the Cowboys. And that game at the end was so crazy that I think the one you're talking about, one of them, and of course that's where the name Hail Mary came from.
That's right.
And we're ahead. And I thought, hey, we're going to win this game. It's going to be another tough Viking Cowboy game. There was one of the guys, this one you're talking about, might have bobbled the ball going out, so they got a catch. We go like, it's not a catch. You got to secure it. Okay. And a couple plays before that, Alan Page literally, I think it was John Nyland, literally grabbed him by the front of his jersey and pull him to the ground instead of getting him let go through for Staubach. And then okay, one more play, and you see that play. We'll claim it a push on the low back right above the belt. Nice way to do it. Smart play. Krause sees it. He kind of slows up, and he's in fact complaining right out as he probably should have kept running and tried to make a tackle. I don't know if he could have or not, but it was like, man, And of course, then the series, it couldn't have got worse after. If that wasn't bad enough, then the next play where I'm laying up to kickoff return, and a bottle comes literally flying over my head, hits the referee right in the noggin, knocks him out.
That's right.
Tarkenton's dad dropped dead back in Atlanta watching the game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had a heart attack and died. I mean, we didn't know it at the time.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. And we were favored to win. We always were pretty good in the home field and in the cold weather and all that. And I
watched that play the other day, and I always saw a flag fly across Drew Pearson. I'm like, why is no one calling a flag? And then finally, I listened to some broadcast. There was an orange that was thrown on the field.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I've watched that many times, and I think Drew Pearson, who came up, and I hate to say it, Drew Pearson's a good guy, push on the low back. Okay. I mean, I'm sure we had to do it over again. Krause would have kept on running and different things. Jeff Wright was back there, and
did that motivate you guys for the next season, or like when you got over the loss? Did that motivate you guys, or
yeah, and but even in my mind, looking back now, you go like, we lived and died. I mean, I love to talk about offensive football, but we had a legitimately terrific defense, and it was a front four. We had ball hawks in the secondary with Bobby Bryant, Paul Krause. I mean, Paul got 81 for the league record, but Bobby's got 52 or 3, And then we had Nate Wright and Jeff Wright, and we had Jeff Seaman still young at a linebacker. So we kind of retooled the defense, but the strength of the defense, all those guys four guys up front. First it was Gary Larson a few years, and Doug Sutherland came in.
Yeah.
But boy, we had, I would say, 3 legitimate Hall of Famers. Marshall's been left out, and I guess I'm sure you can't put everybody in the Hall of Fame from the Vikings, but and Page and Eller were no-brainers. They both had 120 sacks or whatever it was, and good careers, and were kind of always All-Americans. And Page and Notre Dame, Allen Carl with the Gophers, and so, but they were getting old. So that was our chance. And the next year, you'll say, if you watch the game against the Raiders, they had these big, Upshaw and Archibald, and our guys. Alan Page was weighing 220 pounds in those days. He wanted to go on a kick where he came out of Notre Dame at 270, and then he's playing at 220. Bud cut him for $100 later on, but he was marching to his own drummer. And the other guys, I mean, they were just, they weren't the same guys. I mean, they were wonderful guys with, courageous hearts, but the bodies at 37 and 40 years old. I mean, the Raiders had some big boys up front. Casper at the tight end.
Yeah. That's right. So we talked a little bit about, I mentioned Tarkenton getting lost in the discussion. You played for a coach that is in an era in that decade with Knoll, Shula, and Landry, and there's Bud Grant, right? What was it like playing for him? He always seemed very focused, but very quiet on the sidelines. I did some research on him. I didn't realize he played in the NBA. He coached or played up. Did he coach in the CFL?
No, he was big time winning coach in Winnipeg, Blue Bombers.
That's right. And so he did more than just coach for the Vikings. I mean, he played in the NBA. And what was it like playing for him?
Well, I loved it. I mean, he at first, he put a real, if you didn't make mistakes, kept your mouth shut, played hard, all this stuff. He loved veteran players. And that was, so if I was playing, I mean, somebody's coming to take your position every year. But if you did the job and still were, your head was screwed on straight. You had a job. I mean, we had veteran players, which kind of cost us a little bit when there's a fine line between a veteran player and over the hill. When you're over the hill, then you're phoning it in. But he could make some shrewd, not just him, you get to pick up Ahmad Rashad on the scrap heap. He was from St. Louis, did a bad, I think he went out to Seattle, so we get him. John Gilliam before was just a guy with the Cardinals. We get him, he's great. And he did that with a bunch of, so he had a pretty good eye for talent. But also he would delegate Jerry Burns, who worked on Lombardi, offense coordinator all my years, and Bob Holloway and Neil Armstrong both went on to be head coaches with limited success. Neil went down to the Bears and Bob Holloway to the Cardinals. But the theory was if it's not broke, let's go with it. And so he went with the guys, maybe, and myself included. It's okay. He's not gonna make mistakes, but all of a sudden you need a game of big plays now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you said something that almost is identical to what Paul Krause said about him. He said, we love to play for him. And then you have Fran Tarkenton that said he didn't raise his voice, he didn't yell, but if he said something, you listen because it made sense.
Oh, yeah. He made things. I mean, I broadcast the game for 18 years. I got done and worked for Bud when he was still coaching, when he came back there after Les Steckel, and never heard him swear. Great athlete. I mean, he's a legend around Wisconsin, Minnesota for pitching baseball during the summer one. I mean,
that's right. I read that.
Bud could knew the value of a dollar. Let's put it that way. He'd collect the money, and they'd have traveling baseball and basketball teams of old Gophers and Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But a patient, common sense approach would not permit any turmoil in the locker room. I mean, Jim Marshall and Mick Tingeloff and some of the old guys handled the locker room. Bud was never heard of give a pep talk once. He said, just do your job. And, other guys with position coaches might fire you up a little bit. But
okay,
saying that, it was not very orderly locker rooms. Yeah, he'd on the sidelines, what they call them, stone facer. He'd never look like it was winning or losing, and never saw him sweat. And he had rules. So if you didn't stand up and line up for the national anthem, well, you'd catch more hell than if you dropped a pass.
The one thing about Bud Grant, he never looked cold.
Well, and he'd tell a story like when he's coaching in Winnipeg, an igloo story about the Eskimos could work and then cold. I didn't know what understood it, but he told that every year in training camp, like, it's going to be cold, just get used to it. If you're not, you won't be here, and you can do your work. And we'd love to have the Cowboys or the Rams or the Redskins come up when it's frozen, the frozen tundra. That a guy from NFL Films would say the smoke's coming out of your mouth, and we'd go, at the gate. And we were not ever a real speed team, but those slow fields, kind of frozen fields, that's right up our alley.
What was it like in the huddle? Can you tell me a huddle story, like the presence in the huddle of Tarkenton or other guys? Was it he definitely was in control? Was there a lot of chatter, or it was just very businesslike?
Businesslike, and he is completely in control. They're very simplistic. That we were not a fancy, glittery. As I said, I played the 11 years I played. I never lined up more than 3 feet from Ron Yeri or Grady Alderman on the left side, or then Steve Riley. The year I played in, there was never went in motion or was off the line of scrimmage or anything like that. Very basic. It was like Jerry Burns used to call it square helmet football. I mean, we're like the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to run the ball, ran 65-70% of the time early on with Bill Brown and Osborne, but then with Chuck Foreman and Brent McClanahan and Ricky Young. And, we're going to pound it in there because we didn't have to score a lot of points. Later on, you had to score at least 24, 28 points to win the game. But early on, I mean, I think we beat the Packers, I don't know how many times, like 10-3 or something like that. The game. So that was, he was great with, because being the hunter, he'd always be looking at the wind. Well, the wind's going to, I think he believed he could forecast what's going to happen. Well, we'll take the wind here, and then the second half, it looks like I can see a duck flew toward the north instead of the south. So, we'll have to,
Have to adjust to the elements, right?
Oh yeah, well he would, yeah, but he would. You could never get things by him in some of these playoff games. We're one of the only teams that are both benches were on the same side of the field at Metropolitan Stadium. So, we played the Rams, and they'd have blowers, and guys would be huddled up in hand warmers, and
Right.
we'd try to matriculate down to where we could be standing to get something. And he'd
Right.
look over there, and one look from Bud, and you knew you were doing something wrong. So, all right, no gloves. We still wear short sleeve shirts we were in training camp. Of course, the NFL, as shown by the salaries, there were no locker rooms are very stark and very uniforms. If your uniform ripped, okay, we'll get you another uniform. If not, they'll sew it up.
Right. So after your playing days, you transitioned to become an announcer. Was that always the plan? Did you fall into that? And how was it like going from on the field to behind the mic and having to give opinions and maybe some criticism to some of the players?
Well, no, I was not. I didn't think about it too much, although I did. I think my last year, I did some. I did some broadcast or just help broadcast some high school football and kind of just for fun. Never thought about it, but when Grady Alderman, who was left, the time I left, Grady Alderman was the announcer, but he left to be general manager of the Broncos, so it was open. Timing was perfect, so I got the job, and it was fun. I also did the Badgers for years, so after playing a long time, I thought about coaching in those days. Bud was still, until my last year, it was Bud and it started with Bud and 4 coaches. Then it was Bud and 6 coaches. Near the end, they had Les Steckel and a guy named Floyd Reese, who ended up being a good coach and ended up being general manager of the Falcons. They're a small time deal. I would have thought about coaching. I did talk to Jerry Burns. In those days, being assistant coach was not like it is today. 25-man staffs and making a couple $200,000-$300,000. It was like, you got a college degree. Why would you want to be an assistant coach here? It's hit the road. And Jerry Burns said, well, he always called me boy. He said, well, if you go here, boy, well, you have to go somewhere for about 3 years, like East Texas State to Valdosta State, maybe, and we'll try to get you back here. I go, man, I was kind of falling in love with Minnesota, so in Minneapolis, and it was close to my hometown of Madison. So, but now if I knew then, coaching now, my buddy Mike Malarkey, who said the same thing to me later on, he says, hey, he ended up being a tight end with the Vikings and then with Steelers. Well, he went, he was working for 3M, our local big company, and he said, I still got a football Jones here. And I said, go down and see Tony Dungy, coach of the Vikings, was head coach of Tampa. He went and got their assistant. Well, he coached for about 12 years. He's been interim head coach about 2 or 3 times, and just retired. So, and then probably made a pretty good paycheck. But in those days, and it had enough playing. I love football, but by the time you're 11, that it's about it. That's about all it takes to take.
Absolutely. Stu, this has been phenomenal discussion. Love hearing these names, your stories. Let's close it out with a speed round. All right. I'm going to give you
Great.
4 or 5 names and just give me your initial thoughts. We'll go through this really quick. I got 6 names.
Good. I got the time.
All right. And you mentioned, let's see here. You mentioned every one of these guys in the episode so far. So number 1, Mick Tingelhoff.
Iron Mike, he always would say to people, I had a backup center that said, Scott Anderson, who's All-American out of Missouri, comes in. He says, I'm the 3rd string center for the Vikings. And we only had 2 centers, him and Mick. He says, I'm 3rd string because it's Mick Tingelhoff and Mick Tingelhoff hurt. And then if Mick Tingelhoff is dead, I guess he got in there. So that's the way it was. You could always count on him. You look at centers today, and he was kind of a chunky 240 pounds, not a big guy, but game and could move his feet pretty good. And, a true Hall of Famer, great leader. He was kind of a Nebraska Nebraska farm boy. He played in with Nebraska with another guy that coached the Vikings, Monty Kiffin, but true Hall of Famer.
Right. Fran Tarkenton.
My roommate, he's a character, fun. I mean, he was one of the first guys, he was on That's Incredible and Monday Night Football. I think he'll stay in New York. He'd always say to me some tips, because all the guys he met in New York, he said, pick up when you meet some of these guys, these business guys, pick up a card for down the road and say hello, play the role. And he could play the role, and he was outspoken and the stuff he could pander pretty good to the press. He was a master doing that. But I remember in the game against Super Bowl against the Steelers, I'm the guy who has to answer the phone in the room. We're down in New Orleans. The phone call, who is it? I speak to Fran Tarkenton. Yeah, who is this? Oh, Gerald Ford. I go, oh, yeah, I guess so. Then a knock on the door, and it's Howard Cosell and Reggie Jackson. Well, yeah, come on in, guys. I literally had to get the door and then that's the night where they went down to the Courtyard. We were staying at the Courtyard Hotel, kind of one of the motor hotels in New Orleans, when Wally Hilgenberg and Alan Page threw the bucket of water over when Tarkenton was being interviewed by Cosell in the Courtyard, and of course moved his hairpiece askew. And after that, he had no use for the Vikings.
I never knew that.
But fun guy. I mean, boy, I'd say about him, the best thing that could happen, somebody could cheap shot him or get a little trickle of blood from his nose. And once Francis got pissed off, I said, oh, this is good. We're going to win, because he'd ball us out, and then then he'd stick the needle in this guy's as he was lighting him up, because he had that nice, arrogant, mean streak that goes a long way in football.
Okay. I don't know if I should say honorable before, but Alan Page.
Eclectic guy. He's a guy that plays the tuba. He was, he's a little bit of a disruptor. Was in early years, like 73, 74, 75, the union was getting strong. He's big in the union. The logo was no freedom, no football. And he believed that. Him and Bud always were at odds, and he would kind of, but it's the same deal when he would get on we played the Lions one time, and they were holding him, and he was complaining, and he went on a tear, and I think scared the heck out of his name. Landry. I know the quarterback's name was Landry. I know it was Greg Landry. And,
Greg Landry, right.
When he got mad, then he was not near the end. He was not the biggest guy, but really quick and destructive. Another true Hall of Famer.
How about Paul Krause?
My wife taught all his kids, so we
really.
We're very close. She was teacher down in Lakeville, which is a south suburb. He's a great athlete, first of all. Another tall guy, 6'3", great hands. He was always played Bud told him, you're the center fielder. You get back there, and of course, with the front four, that quarterbacks wanted to get rid of that ball. They didn't want to get sacked, so he was back there, and he never dropped an interception. That's why he got 81. I mean, that record stood a long time. Probably nobody's even close, I don't think. I think we got to get Harrison Smith. He's had a great career at 10, 11, 12 years. He's got maybe 43 or 44. So that's record will stand.
We talked about this player, Chuck Foreman. Do you want to add anything else about Chuck? Please,
whatever you got. If you got any muscle, get him in the Hall of Fame. We've tried, I think, because we had a kind of a sports writer, heard the name Sid Hartman, who was our local sports writer on the Hall of Fame committee. And I've heard that, and he's passed away, and rest in peace, but you got to campaign for that. And I think Chuck's career we never got paid much. And then he finally left to go to the New England and had a year, and that was it. So I think his career's probably been only 7, 8 years. But those 73, 74, 75, and 76, in my mind, was the best player in football.
No doubt.
And the most needed player in football. Durable, too. I mean, and then could have done more if you would have used him more, but you couldn't use him up. But, boy.
Right.
And a good competitor.
All right, last one. Stu Voigt.
Overachiever, worked hard, type of guy that always wanted to be listed as 6'1" and 220 in my football cards, probably on the card you showed me. And it's like, I was 220 pounds in high school because I was heavier than that. But, you can't fool them, yeah, there it is.
6'1", 210.
Oh, Jesus.
6'1", 210.
So the interest, I worked hard for everything I earned. And I think, when the ball was, you're not going to get many balls when you got the Foremans and you got the Rashads and Sammy Whites. So everything you could throw to you, you better catch it.
Yeah. But in 1972, I'm looking at your stats. You had one rushing touchdown against the Packers. I actually saw that play, and I have it.
Yeah, I had a little, and Willie Buchanan, we laugh about that. I'll see him in a little border battle in golf this summer. I did cross the goal line, but it was one of those. I lined up tight end, came from the left to the right, got a handoff, and got in. It was
right.
Who knows why we call that play? I think I ran it one other time for about maybe didn't get a touchdown, I don't think. But, it was our form of the tush push, I guess, something.
Were you in because their D-back was complaining on the play that you weren't in?
Of course he was. That was Willie, yeah. Yeah, no, I was in. I mean,
okay.
They call the playing of the goal line. I'll stand on that defense, but I'm glad I made it.
That's great play. Stu, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the autograph. It's part of my collection. I was looking through my collection. I have Gary Larson and I have Alan Page. I actually have Alan Page on his Wonder Bread card.
Oh, do you really?
You remember those Wonder Bread cards?
Yeah, sure. Well, Gary Larson, too. He was a guy out of the Marines, played a little college like in the college. But, another guy of the front four, they always talk about the first. He was replaced then because he was older. He went in the service. And along the way, that's why it's so much fun talking to you. A guy like Gary Larson, a real man. And in fact, he's the guy when he spoke, everybody goes, oh, okay, and Bud would use him because he was a Marine to show us how to stand at attention and helmet under one arm and hand over your heart. And
right.
That was the whole thing. And unforgettable characters. We had a lot of them on the Vikings in those days.
You getting ready for the draft?
I'm actually, for some reason, it's in Lambeau, and the Vikings and the NFL are going to fly me up there to make the Vikings choice. We don't. We have a first round choice, which is Goodell makes those, but I don't think we have a choice in the second round. But whenever they choose, I'll be up there. You'll be able to see me on Sports Center or something.
I'm going to tape it then, Stu. I got to watch it now that you're going to be up there. That's fantastic. So good for you.
little perk for being a Badger, I guess.
There you go. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Enjoyed this. Love you and the players from that era. Yeah. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on.
Thank you. Call me anytime. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.